2. Larry stepped into the shower and stuck his head under the tepid water. It robbed him of his breath for a moment, but he was so desperate to wash away the grime of the last few hours that he gladly risked hypothermia. Now that he was out of sight of those clowns downstairs, Larry allowed himself a brief moment of self-pity. The urge to sob uncontrollably almost overtook him, but he just about managed to suppress it, even though he knew it would help ease the knot that he had been tightening deep in his stomach ever since he had woken a week ago and finally realized he was shit out of luck, which left only one option. And so he had reluctantly surrendered himself into the hands of those he had always thought of as the enemy. He stopped himself because he knew that once he started, he wasn't sure he would ever be able to stop. He rested his forehead against the cold tiles and tried to tell himself that he had been in worse scrapes than this before, and still came through the other side. After all, wasn't that what he was famous for? By rights, Larry McCulloch should have been found dead in a ditch somewhere on any number of occasions before this, but someone had always come through for him at the last minute. Larry's philosophy, which had kept him alive this long, was quite simple. If you're going to pull a fast one and fuck somebody over on a deal, just make sure it benefits not only you, but also somebody who's bigger or stronger than the fellow you've just fucked. That way, they have to grin and bear it or risk an even bigger shafting from your new partner. Sure, it was risky, but in the end, Larry knew that was all part of the charm. He had a thinly disguised self-destructive streak. Always had. Sometimes he even shocked himself. He remembered what a hitman had once said to him while they were waiting for their victim to emerge from a late nightclub one night, years ago. Deep down, every killer wants to get caught eventually. That had always rung true with Larry, and in moments of vulnerability like now, more than ever. Still, as no one he had ever known had the balls to pull some of the stunts he had over the years, Larry had attained a kind of mythic status amongst the underworld. Not just here, but in Europe too, which he had always enjoyed, probably too much in fact, because it had worked well enough as long as his friends had outnumbered his enemies. But somewhere along the way, his list of friends had grown shorter, and his enemies alarmingly longer, until he'd had no choice but to play his last card and get the fuck out of Dodge. His famous black book, which was in fact rather less glamorously half a dozen Teddy folders crammed full to bursting and a cheap flash drive, that was his ticket out of here. It was a stroke of genius and safely tucked away ready for its big entrance. The thought of the chaos it would cause never failed to lift his spirits, and when the shit hit the fan, he would melt quietly away somewhere hot. Somewhere a million miles away from here, so all this would be just a distant memory, if he would be able to recall it at all. And then he knew the legend of Lucky Larry McCulloch would be set in stone. He imagined there would be books, maybe even biopic. Yeah, he would like that. And so, with images of media immortality buzzing around his head, Larry got out of the shower and dried himself off. Once he had changed into some clean clothes, Larry felt a million times better, and even felt up to another round of moronic conversation with his so-called protectors. That coupled with the smell of freshly delivered pizza that tempted Larry downstairs. As he got to the hallway, he could see Peroni through the living room door, mobile in one hand and a slice of pepperoni in the other. She was pacing the floor speaking Italian again, in between nibbling on the pizza. Although he couldn't speak much Italian, he knew whoever was unfortunate enough to find himself on the other end of the phone was getting a tongue lashing, hopefully about the shithole they were staying in. Hearing voices from the kitchen, Larry wandered through to see Lewis sitting at a cheap plastic top table, munching on some garlic bread, while Jeff was in the corner studying two monitors which occasionally flicked between different parts of what Larry assumed must be outside the house. At least they had some sort of security system in place. Lewis jumped up theatrically from his seat seeing Larry enter. "Don McCulloch, take a seat." What can I get you, sir? We've got pepperoni, ham, and pineapple. And for our veggie friends, margarita. Larry ignored him and eyed the pizza boxes on the table. He opened one and took a slice of margarita. Anything to drink? He asked, taking a bite. Tea, coffee, it's freshly brewed. And I think there is some bottled water in the fridge, offered Lewis. Anything stronger? Larry said in between chewing.
Jeff looked up from the monitors. I've got some shindy. I know I shouldn't while on duty, but what the heck? This won a smile from Lewis, but just more contempt from Larry. Coffee. Larry grunted and took a seat on one of the mismatched chairs opposite where Lewis was sitting. Lewis poured Larry a mug of coffee and sitting back down slid it across the table to him. Up close, it smelled burned. How was your shower? Jeff asked. The water is freezing, Larry said. He sipped the coffee and winced at the sour taste. He gestured around him. Is this really the best you people can come up with? Government cutbacks, Lewis said, shrugging apologetically. You know how it is? He then picked up another piece of garlic bread and proceeded to feed his face. Yeah, Jeff said, leaned back in his chair and stretched. Here, Larry, there has been something I've been meaning to ask you. Seeing as all the trouble you're now in, didn't anybody ever tell you? Crime doesn't pay. At school, maybe? Be fair, Lewis said. That was a long time ago. Larry was about to answer when Peroni poked her head around the door. Good you're eating, Larry. How was your shower? Cold like his heart, Lewis said, glancing mischievously at Larry. The Italian ignored the comments. I'm off then. Keep in touch. I should be back tomorrow sometime. Lewis nodded. Will do, Chief. See you later. Any problems, Larry? See Lewis until I return. Bye for now. She disappeared again. This pleased Lewis no end. I think he's got a list, he said. Be nice, Peroni called back before the front door slammed shut. Jeff checked one of the monitors and followed her as she walked down the garden path and into the car, and once she had pulled away, repositioned the camera so it was covering the front door once more. She'd be attractive if she removed that rod from up her arse, Larry said and finished his slice of pizza. Don't knock the boss, Larry. She's a gem, Jeff said, playing with the camera control. She will keep your sorry backside alive if you let her. This won a snort of derision from Larry. So, Larry, Lewis said, pointing a half-eaten piece of garlic bread at him, how did a high roller like you end up in a place like this? He gave Lewis a bored look, but thought, what the hell, a bit of banter might make the time go quicker. You goody-goodies tell me crime doesn't pay. Just an observation, Larry, taking into account your current situation, Jeff said, turning to face them both. All right, smart guy, Larry continued. Tell me this. Where will you two dickheads be this time next year, huh? Shall I tell you? Go on, Lewis said. Nowhere. That's where. Lewis and Jeff exchanged a mock quizzical look. Lewis made to speak, but Larry continued. You'll be risking your lives stuck in a dump like this, guarding some other wanker who doesn't care if you live or die. And you know where I'll be? No, Jeff said, but I'm sure you're going to tell us. Pausing for dramatic effect, Larry took another sip of bitter coffee before he spoke. In the sun, mate, in the fucking sun, living it up in Rio for the rest of my pampered life. Now tell me crime doesn't pay. Lewis leaned back in his chair. He raised his eyebrows and gave Larry a look something akin to pity, which reeled him instantly. Larry, he finally said, just because you've agreed to testify against all your so-called gangster mates doesn't mean you're going to be able to walk away from all you've done. It doesn't work like that anymore, I'm afraid. You're fast out of friends, he gestured to Jeff. We're all you've got left. Now how sad is that? Larry gave Lewis his best smug look. Queen's evidence is a wonderful thing, my friends. Once I give your bosses the shit they want, the ones who I haven't got dirt on, that is, I walk scot-fucking-free. He's got you there, Lewis, Jeff interjected. Unruffled, Lewis got to his feet and walked over to the sink, where he began washing out his mug. "Arr," he said. "The famous book. You really do live in your own little world, don't you?" "He's a legend in his own lunchtime." Jeff spun on his chair and glanced at the monitors. Then, happy all was well, he spun back. "Huh, yeah," Lewis continued. "He's just going to walk away from all he's done." He clicked his fingers. "Just like that. The infamous Lucky Larry McCulloch, huh?" Larry drained his cup, which made him wince at the taste. "You know, why anybody would want to be a bodyguard in this day and age is beyond me." Lewis turned around, suddenly serious, which took Larry aback slightly. After all, this was just harmless banter, wasn't it? "You don't know anything about us, Larry." The kid Jeff, however, was still in fine form. "But they give us guns, Larry. Guns." He pulled his jacket aside to reveal a shoulder holster. Larry glanced at it, then back to Lewis, who was staring at him intently, frowning slightly. So, Larry thought, a chink in the armor. Lewis hated him. That much he already knew. But he hated having to risk his own life for him even more. "Thanks for the armor, kid." As if feeling the tension, Jeff said, "Guns," again, to which Lewis nodded and patted his own gun under his jacket. "Huh," snorted Larry. "You lot have to fill in a million forms just to shoot one of those things. God forbid you should actually hit anything." "Not like when you were a lad, huh, Larry?" Jeff said with a sarcastic wink Larry happily ignored, but nodded all the same. "In my day," he said, "if I wanted some twat shots, all I had to do was pick up the phone." He made his hand into a gun and fired it at Lewis. Bang! Then he hit the table for dramatic effect. This raised a slight smile from Lewis. "And just think, now someone is going to do the same for you," he said, then softly added, "Bang?" Larry held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "Don't worry about me," he said. The smile on Lewis' face broadened. "Oddly enough, we don't," he replied. "Gotcha," thought Larry. He mused. "Yet you might have to take a bullet to save me and my precious book." Lewis' smile faltered ever so slightly, but Larry saw it only too well, so added, "How do you spell imbecile?" Lewis was openly frowning now. He sighed. "You know, you really aren't a very nice person, are you, Larry?" Larry looked at him amused. Lewis studied him for a moment, then added, "Ever heard the expression, 'What you sow, you shall reap'?" "Very biblical," Larry replied nonchalantly. "Or live by the sword, die by the sword," Jeff added gleefully. Larry shook his head. The clock on the wall said 22:30, and he decided after the day he'd had and the way things were going down here that it was well past his bedtime. He stood up. "You know, if asshole could fly, this place would be an airport." This made Jeff laugh out loud, and even raised a smile from Lewis. Jeff clapped. "Good one line, Larry," he said. Lewis shrugged. "Well, it was more two than one, but good nevertheless." That was it. Larry threw his hands up and left them to it. "Enough of this bollocks," he said on the way out. "I'm off to bed." He got as far as the bottom of the stairs when Jeff shouted, Larry, you should go into showbiz with a repartee like that." He couldn't help himself and shouted back, "A fucking airport." He was about to ascend the stairs, but he could still hear the two of them twittering on, and stopped on the first step to listen despite himself. It was Jeff. Everyone a classic, everyone a pearl. Yeah, watch out, Bob Monkhouse. Huh? Lewis replied. Bob Monkhouse? Is dead, explained Jeff. Don't be daft. No, he isn't, countered Lewis. He is, insisted Jeff. Nah. Well, concluded Jeff, he must be flipping old then. Old, yes. Dead, no. Hearing this, Larry trudged up the stairs in despair. He couldn't believe these clowns were his last line of defense. Your life in their hands, he said out loud. All the coppers in the world, he mused ruefully. And I get Laurel and fucking Hardy.